Hello everyone, this is MC Deck Discussions and I'm Abby Small, and today we have another deck discussion called Echoes of Winter's Widow, which gives a hint as to what this deck is focused on. It's for Winter Soldier in leadership, and Winter's Widow, his identity-specific ally is Black Widow. So let's take a look at her ability right off the bat. So she has 3 cost, has a wild resource, has an attack of 2, a thwart of 2, and health of 3. She's shield and spy traded. And she has this response: after you play Black Widow from your hand, return an attack event from your discard pile to your hand. So a big part of the goal of this deck is to actually use Black Widow's ability multiple times. And if you look at the response, notice it does say after you play Black Widow from your hand. So you can only use that multiple times if you're getting Black Widow back into your hand. So let's go ahead and look at how we do that right here with 3 copies of Regroup. So that's why we have 3 copies of Regroup. So this is our recursion card that we have the most of. We also have, by the way, 2 copies of Make the Call, and we have 1 copy of Rapid Response. So Make the Call is meant to help us bring back into play, some of these other characters such as Nick Fury or Nick Fury Sr. or whomever else we might have available. And so with those 3 copies of Regroup, right, it's a 1 cost support, is tactic traded, is an interrupt. When an ally is defeated by an enemy attack, return it to its owner's hand instead of discarding it. Has a forced interrupt: when the round ends, discard this card. So for those who might not know, if you do get attacked multiple times, then you keep this card out. You don't get rid of it as soon as you put a card back into your hand, which when I first started playing the game years ago, that is actually what I was doing. I was putting it back. I was discarding Regroup after I put 1 ally back into my hand. I hadn't realized at first that you keep Regroup out until the end of the round, and then you discard it. So that means if you have multiple allies who end up defending, you can get it back into your hand. In addition, it's a great card for multiplayer, which is a big part of the reason why I actually listed this card as a multiplayer deck as well, even though my testing was done all in solo. But I do consider this to be certainly viable for multiplayer. All right, so that's the big focus, is Black Widow and using Regroup. So what I would often do, by the way, is I'd utilize, so she has 3 health. So I would utilize her attack and thwart a couple of times, and I just kept her out in play the rest of the time. I didn't usually have to get rid of her after that, though if I were desperate, I could always get her back into play with Make the Call. It wouldn't trigger her ability, but it would get her back into play in order to have Regroup used. But I don't know that I ever did that. It's hard to say if I ever did that. Okay. All right. So, and you can take a look at the other allies here as well. They're very strong allies as a whole, but I want to focus in on the most that big part of this strategy here. So with that in mind, that means that our goal is to play attack events. So let's look at his attack events. So that means whenever you play Black Widow, you get to pick one of those events. Now, typically I would only get to do this 2 or maybe 3 times that I'd play Black Widow. So it's not as if I was doing it all the time. However, Winter Soldier has a lot of attack events, and we have a really important one that we've added to this deck as well. So we have 2 copies of Arm Block, which is an attack/defense event. When an enemy attacks, deal 3 damage to it. If you exhausted Cybernetic Arm to pay for this event, prevent all damage from that enemy's attack. Just a beautiful card there, and it's only 1 cost. We also have 2 copies of Electrical Discharge. A cost of 2 is an attack. Hero action, deal 4 damage to an enemy. If you paid for this event using an energy resource, stun that enemy, which is very easy to do the vast majority of the time. We'll get into why that is in a sec. And then Metal Punch is a 3 cost attack. Hero action, deal 7 damage to an enemy. If you exhausted Cybernetic Arm to pay for this event, this attack gains overkill. So so that cybernetic arm is the reason why all of these work so well. They're able to trigger, their best ability. So we'll look at that in a sec. But I did want to introduce one more attack event. This one was added to the deck: Winter Widow Soldier Spy. This is a team-up card, so you can only play this if you do have Black Widow in play, at least if you're playing this solo. So the Black Widow ally in play. Hero action: put a preparation upgrade from your discard pile into play. Notice that occurs first, then deal 4 damage to an enemy. So this is really critical that the preparation upgrade goes into play prior to the damage. So you'll see in a little bit. So first, let's go ahead. We talked about, why don't we cover, we've already been talking about the events. Why don't we cover the last ones? We already mentioned 2 copies of Make the Call. And let's look at Squared Off. 2 copies of these. 0 cost event, tactic, hero action: discard cards from the counter deck until you discard a minion. Put that minion into play, engage with you. Play an ally from your hand, reducing its cost by 3. And you have to be careful about using this card because you should know what minions are in the deck and what you might be facing, and would you in fact be able to defeat them. And that is why I wasn't necessarily using this card for every single one of my allies. More typically, I would use it when I had Black Widow, actually, because you get to put an attack event in your hand afterwards and be able to use that to help defeat whatever minion comes into play. And we better mention Winter Soldier's abilities real quickly here soon. And I might use it sometimes for Mockingbird, because even if I can't defeat that minion, when Mockingbird enters play, you could stun an enemy. So you could always stun that minion if you wanted. Or, of course, you could stun the what do you call it? The villain. And then, so maybe once in a while with that. But Nick Fury is the main other one. But I would use some of these others too. It depends on what allies I had already in play so that I knew I could deal enough damage, or maybe what type of events I might have had in my hand, attack events, so that I knew I would be able to handle whatever minion came into play using Squared Off. There is an additional risk with Squared Off, and that is when you use it frequently, you end up discarding a lot of cards from the encounter deck, and you end up with acceleration tokens relatively fast. However, I found that I generally didn't have more acceleration tokens playing this deck than I do with other decks, because Winter Soldier, because he has so many attacks, how many was that altogether? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then plus this one makes 8. With that many attack events, he was dealing a lot of damage throughout the game to the villain. So he gets through the battle faster. So I would usually end up with maybe an acceleration token because of getting through the deck so fast. Okay. But I'd also would strategically choose not to use Squared Off at times too. Okay. All right, so let's get into some of the other aspects of this deck, including the preparation upgrades. So we mentioned that Winter Widow Soldier Spy, right? 2 cost event, it's an attack. It's the team up card. Put a preparation upgrade from your discard pile into play, deal 4 damage to an enemy. So we have several preparation cards. 4 altogether, actually, because there's also Practice Plan. That's not usually the one I would choose, but I might not have a choice. Also, 1 copy of Rapid Response. So if that's in my discard pile, that could possibly go into play. More often, I would choose Silent Infiltration, which is a preparation and a hero response. After you attack and defeat an enemy, discard this card, ready your hero, and confuse an enemy. So when I mentioned this, the order of this, you put a preparation upgrade into play from your discard pile into play, then deal your 4 damage, and it'll be 5 damage if you use your cybernetic arm. So we better bring that up now. So 1 cost upgrade, item and tech traits is a resource card, exhaust cybernetic arm, generate a wild resource for an attack event. That event deals 1 additional damage. So typically then when I would play Winter Widow Soldier Spy, I would deal 5 damage. For a lot of the minions, that was enough to defeat them. That's why it's important that if I put so there are 2 copies of Silent Infiltration. If I put one of these into play, it would trigger right away if I then defeated the minion. So after you attack and defeat an enemy, discard this card, ready your hero, and confuse an enemy. So I would typically then defeat the minion, then be able to confuse the villain right afterward. So it was really cool the way that interaction worked. That was definitely one of my favorite cards in the deck. It wasn't always the card I chose. I chose it a lot when I would play Black Widow, but I would choose whatever made the most sense at the time. If I felt like I needed the defensive arm block, I might actually choose that. There were a lot of times when I might have when I chose electrical discharge, or I should say, there were times when I chose it because you could then possibly stun the villain. There were times when I would choose Metal Punch because I was going for the end victory and I wanted to deal as much damage to the villain as possible. And, since it gains overkill, if you play this using Cybernetic Arm to pay for it, then you can get rid of one of the minions at the same time. Speaking of which, let's get to Winter Soldier's abilities real quickly. So he has 11 hit points, hand size of 5, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 2 defense, and he has this ability, Lethal Protector, is a response. After you attack and defeat an enemy, remove 2 threat from a scheme. So that's the whole reason why I actually do have Squared Off in here, is because we get that extra benefit of we defeat the enemy and we also get to remove some from something from, to threat from a scheme. So, but like I said, it's Squared Off. It's good to use it. Think about whether you want to use it at the time, because it's not always the best time to use it every single time. If I had Black Widow in hand, it was almost always a great choice. All right. So let's see. Oh, let's go back to Bucky Barnes. And then his alter ego, he has 3 recovery and a hand size of 6. And he has this ability, Cybernetically Enhanced. It's an action. Spend 1 resource of any type, search your deck and discard pile for Cybernetic Arm, and put it into play. So right on your first turn, you could just use this action right off the bat and guarantee that you could get your Cybernetic Arm into play, which is really great. All right. So let's get into some of the other important cards. We also had a call for backup for some more recursion, usually to get Nick Fury back into the game and be able to draw several cards. And let's see, we also had our supports, our helicarrier and team building exercise, which is why we have build support in here, which, by the way, we didn't. So I had played 5 games already, and I had 2 copies of Command Team in the deck, and for obvious reasons, right? Command Team allows you can exhaust Command Team. It has 3 uses and remove 1 command counter from it and ready an ally. And it's a 2-cost support, shield support. But I found I just wasn't playing this card. So I ended up removing these 2 copies. In the 5 games that I played with it, I only played that card 1 time. It just wasn't the priority compared to all of these attack events and so many other cards. In addition, so that's why I added build support, because every time I definitely wasn't getting Helicarrier into the game as often as I wanted to. But every time it was in the game, it was highly effective. So I build support for my last few games, build support ended up making that more consistent, so I could get Helicarrier in every single game. And then same with Superpower training, I wanted Winter Rifle, because Winter Rifle is an incredible upgrade. So here it is, right? A 3-cost upgrade, and it's a weapon, but it is 3 cost, right? So it's kind of expensive. And it's restricted, has a hero interrupt. When Winter Soldier makes a basic attack, exhaust Winter Rifle, Winter Soldier gets +2 ATK for this attack, and the attack gains piercing and range. So it's just a fantastic card. So instead of his usual 2 attack, he's doing 4 attack, and he can pierce right through those tufts, and he has range, so he doesn't have to worry about retaliation. So that card is just awesome, but I wasn't getting it in every single game. And so adding Superpower training made a big difference for that in those last few games, which I was really glad of course, when I started facing Magneto. Speaking of which, I did rotate in a new, for the villains tested against, I finally brought out Eunice. I've had took out Eunice. I'd been playing, Eunice has been in my rotation for a while. So I had Claw, and I replaced Eunice with Black Widow. And boy, I remembered that Black Widow was pretty tough during the campaign, but I had forgotten how tough. So Black Widow is no pushover, just like Eunice wasn't. So great addition to this. Definitely tests your hero. So this is quite, Claw is the only one that tends to give me a decent break. But even with my expert house rule, even that can be pretty challenging. And then but Black Widow, Ensab, and Noor, who is a version of Apocalypse, and Magneto. This is really a great set of villains to test your hero with. All right, so let's finish up here. All right, well, those are the key elements of this deck. So being able to, it did make a difference also, by the way, to use Make the Call, to recur Nick Fury, sometimes Nick Fury Sr., using Regroup to do that with them, or with Black Widow, preferably with Black Widow a lot of the time. But if I have Nick Fury or Nick Fury Sr., I'm definitely going to defend with them, because since they're going to be discarded at the end of the round. So there were times when I might have used Regroup for them, but most of the time I would use Make the Call. All right, highly effective deck, dealing damage consistently. So here's what the pattern of how each game was played. So like I said, this deck was, you could say, a more efficient deck in terms of my victories tended to come more quickly because of all these attack events. I was dealing damage to the villain somewhat regularly, and I would eventually get to the point where I was coming near the end of the villain's first stage or second stage, if I'm an expert. And then I would get to the point, and then I would get maybe Silent Infiltration in play and be able to put to be able to confuse the villain so that I was safe. And then I would tend to mostly ignore the threat, especially side schemes. I would just let the side schemes stay in play, and I would just go for attacking the last few rounds. And so it was very easy to just finish off the villain at the end of the game, especially if I got Black Widow back into my hand. If I was finishing off the game, I would a lot of times want Metal Punch to deal that 8 damage, at least 7. A lot of the games I would end up dealing somewhere between like 18, 19, or 20 damage in the final round. So I wouldn't usually defeat the villain in one shot, but I would just have things in hand. So there would come a point, like it would feel kind of risky because there's so much, I'm not used to leaving so much threat out on the board. So it would feel a bit risky, but knowing that the villain wouldn't be able to scheme, and that I was safe, I wouldn't be able to lose the game, and I could just stay on this side. This was plenty of allies, especially with Make the Call, 2 copies of Make the Call and 3 copies of Regroup. So plenty of allies to defend with, and a couple of arm blocks to defend with as well. So in this deck, so some of you may know from previous videos, I like generally going to alter ego side for a lot of heroes, but I usually only did that like once a game with Winter Soldier. I don't know, maybe one of the games I went down to alter ego twice, but pretty much I took advantage of his high hit points, the 11 hit points, and the defending with the allies and with arm block. I did have some risky moments. I had one time where, like when I was playing against expert, I actually thought I was going to lose against expert Magneto because I was down to 1 point, and every time I would want to go down to heal, Magneto would make me turn. Right, so he has cards in his deck, encounter cards, and he would make me turn. It was like 3 turns in a row I had 1 point, and those of you who played Magneto a decent number of times know he can also just deal damage to you and just end the game. So that part felt really risky because Magneto wasn't allowing me to go to my alter ego side to heal for like 3 turns in a row. But I finally got a chance to do it, got back up to 3 points, and then that was all I needed to feel safe, and then I could go back to the other side and finish off Magneto. It felt like a bit of a miracle. I actually thought I was going to lose. Magneto was bringing his stuff in that expert game, but I was able to pull it out. So overall, really fun deck. Highly recommend it. Definitely a different type of style for me playing him, more tempo style. But in any case, give it a try, or perhaps use this as inspiration for your own deck. Be sure to like and subscribe if you appreciate this content, and be sure to comment if you wish to. I love having conversations with people in the comment section. Have a good one, everybody.